But
here we are talking about an animated cat.
And yet here we are, and that's where I was going to go with it. Usually I like more mature content, and the 2024 is over. We're already into the 2025 season, and it's been an interesting one so far for the few movies. But I never thought that my two probably top 10 movies of 2024 were going to be two animated films, and yet that's what it ended up being. My two favorite and two probably best pictures for me of what I saw in 2024 was The Wild Robot, which I didn't expect, because when I saw the trailer for The Wild Robot, I was like, oh, okay. And when I watched it, I just fell in love with it. Yeah. And then there was this movie Flow, which I saw a trailer online for, and I'm like, oh. And then I heard a little bit about it. No dialogue. Oh, full feature. Okay, you have my... So award season comes around. I finally get a chance to see it, and my mind is just blown.
Yep, I agree. In fact, I was a humongous fan, still am, of The Wild Robot. I think it's been a very good year for animation. The Memoirs of a Snail and Inside Out 2 and Wallace and Gromit, their further adventure that they had. And at first, when I saw the posters for Flow, I was reminded, it kind of looked like my cat I used to have named Smokey, who was also a gray cat with big yellow eyes. So I noticed it because of that. But then my suspicion was, when I heard that it's an animated story about this cat, I thought, oh, they'll probably have some voiceover and, anthropomorphic sort of qualities like they tend to do with these things. And they certainly did with the Wild Robot and other things like that tend to come along and have that sort of Disney-esque or Pixar sort of template. But I went and saw it in the theaters. I went on a Saturday morning, and there were almost all adults in there, which was sort of funny. It was the first, I think, weekend it was playing on a Saturday. And my mind was blown away, just like yours. I couldn't believe it. I was so moved, so dazzled, so engaged. And I just came out of there, and I had already sort of thought, well, Wicked's going to be a hard movie for me to find that I like better, because I like musicals, and I don't think there's a lot of adaptations of Broadway musicals these days that are done particularly well. And I thought it was very well done, but this one came within a hair of being my best picture of the year, because that's how much I loved it. And I've watched it 2 other times since then. I bought it when it was on available the first day, and it's only more intriguing when you watch it, because now you appreciate sort of the technique and you see the subtleties of some of the stuff. And the more you read about it and how it was done, and Gene Zilba-Lotus, who was the filmmaker who did it, and what he did. I mean, I sent you that clip today of him doing the recording, and he's just got a big ass mic following his cat around. They recorded real animal noises for all of this, and they had tracks that were like, doing the soundtrack. It was like 50 different tracks going on with all the different sound effects and things all mixing. So it's a technical feat of amazing accomplishment. I still can't believe they made that water look as great as they did animation wise. So I know there's now systems that can do things like that better than they have done before. But yeah, it blew me away, and I loved it. And the nice thing that is sort of I think a satisfying thing for me, is hopefully as well for you, Mark, is people are catching up with this now. I mean, it's making money. It's done very well worldwide. It's winning all kinds of awards. I mean, I think if I had to make an Oscar prediction right now, even though it's still early, my guess is that The Wild Robot will win, because it's so good and it was a big hit and made a ton of money and all that stuff. But sometimes they go different ways in the Oscars. And I think once you see this one, you kind of go like, wow, that's really unusual and very special.
Yeah, and see, I'm with you. I mean, Inside Out 2 was amazing. I really enjoyed it quite a bit. I didn't think that they could actually improve upon the first one, but it's its own story. But it was really good. But it is your standard high level Pixar movie, so you kind of expect. And then The Wild Robot, more accessible, got a wider release. It's dialogue, it's Disney-esque, but it's still fantastic. I mean, the story threw me for a loop. I was like, wow, I am into this, and did not expect it with the trailers. And Flow hasn't quite been as accessible. So I'm with you. I think Wild Robot will, only because of accessibility and popularity and who was involved and everything. Right. But Flow could be the dark horse. It's the only one that it could compete with it, I think.
I agree. And it's kind of breaking at the right moment, because it is like suddenly if the Academy members or voters or, who knows, are paying attention, they notice that suddenly this one is winning lots of awards and it's doing very well internationally. It also benefits from being nominated for Best International Feature. Well, I mean, it hasn't been nominated yet. It's a short list. It will probably get both a Best International Feature nomination as well as the animated feature, which is extraordinary for an official entry from a country to be an animated film. And in fact, our critics group just gave it Best International Film, although they gave The Wild Robot Best Animated Film. We sort of ate our cake and had it too. But it is one of those movies that is just, it kind of pulls the rug out from under you. You probably expect it to be good when you see the trailer and, oh, that looks very artistic and beautiful and it seems interesting. And, oh, depending on how you feel about a cat or not, if you want to watch his adventure. But, the other thing I loved about this movie too, Mark, and in some respects, it is almost a companion piece to The Wild Robot, because they're kind of both about, what we do with our planet and, suggesting that maybe we needed to rely on robots to better our worlds because maybe, I don't know, humanity wasn't doing the trick as much anymore. Or here, I mean, it's very, very subtle, but there's no humans in it. And, yet the cat has found refuge in this house of clearly somebody who loved cats because he was sculpting them and drawing them and stuff like that. But where is that guy? Is he, I mean, at first I thought, oh, he's gone for a trip or a vacation or whatever. But then you're starting to wonder as it goes on, like, are there any people left? Maybe this is sort of a apocalyptic sort of film without it being very heavy handed. But, the tsunami comes up and it takes everything out. And then suddenly it's, who's left to survive, and all we see are animals and a disparate group of them as well, and we don't see or hear anything from human beings. So it's making commentaries, but very subtle ones, somewhat similar, like I said, to The Wild Robot.
Well, I mean, it gives you the impression, this is like Earth adjacent, this planet, necessarily. It's very similar to Earth until you meet the wonderful whale character.
Right.
So it could be Earth in the far future.
Right.
You're right. We see remnants of a civilization, and it's something I caught this time around. Because, folks, basically the story is following a cat who suddenly gets caught up in this catastrophe of flooding, and it ends up a ragtag group of animals on a sailboat. You get a capybara, a ringtail lemur,
golden retriever,
a golden retriever, and the golden retriever was adorable.
Oh yeah, so funny.
A cat and a bird, which and they all, some of them look more Earth-like, most of them, but some slight variation. So this could either be in the future of Earth, or it's an adjacent planet that's similar, that had a similar fate. But
I love what you're saying about that too, because at first I thought it seemed like it was a forest, but then it seems like it's more of a almost a jungle in certain respects. And then you've got like the Aztec sort of ruins or stuff that looks like clearly we're in South America, and even the capybara is sort of a South American animal. So it's like, where are we? I mean, again, to your point, it seems to be a little bit of a world adjacent that maybe we're mixing it up a little bit. But even like the house that the cat originally lives in almost seems like a sort of a Swedish villa or something. It has a glockenspiel quality to it. Like, is there a cat clock that the cat comes out and meows every hour? I don't know. But I love the fact that it's so not determined, and yet you're watching this and just getting engulfed in the story. And, it becomes a parable, I think, about a lot of that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you still get all your elements, and after a while, you forget that the animals are not saying any words. Right. The animation is so good in this film that you can see the emote of the animals through their facial expressions and body language and everything. It is so impressive, and their behaviors, that you don't need dialogue.
Right.
when the dog meets the cat, the cat is indifferent once he's done getting chased by his whole pack of buddies. When it's just the golden retriever, he's like, yeah, okay, whatever. Guess what? I can jump up into my house. You can't.
Yeah, right.
And being a golden retriever, he's just like, what a catch. He's just such a happy dog that there's
Yeah.
personalities to each of these.
Right.
We meet the capybara, who's just like, oh, hey, he's kind of chill. He's just like, okay, yeah, you want to ride my boat? That's fine.
Yeah, he's there, but he's not like threatening or
No.
threatened by somebody else joining him. He seems to be pretty chill. As you said, he's like, hey, there's plenty of room for you here if you want to hang out. There's almost a, dare I say, a sort of nagging respect that the animal kingdom has for each other. They're not immediately back on their haunches like, oh, you're a threat to me, I'm going to attack you, or you're the enemy. It's like, no, we all know where the enemy is. It's that big water thing that keeps wanting to take us down. And, oh, there's no more ground over here, or we thought this is going to be good, and we can save a few trinkets, but at the end of the day, we know where the enemy is, and it's not the people who are finding sort of sanctuary on this broken down sailboat.
Yeah, that's one of my wonderful moments in this. There's so many wonderful ones, but one of the great ones and a classic example of being able to tell a whole story and personalities without a single word of dialogue is when the cat and the capybara's boats come across this part of this ruin where a ringtail lemur is living, and it's managed to collect all these shiny objects like lemurs do. Like, it's just got this horde of random metal and shiny crap. And they're coming across it, and it's great because they do this little thing where the capybara doesn't exactly want to turn the boat towards it, and the cat's like, no, we're turning the boat towards it, because the animals are smart enough to know, if I push it this way, it goes this way. If I push it this way, it goes this way. Because cats, they all pick, and that's the thing, they all picked animals that have at least some level of intelligence that you could believe, okay, they figured this out.
And some of it is trial and error, and they never act superhuman or beyond what they can. But I mean, cats know how to open up doors and get into cupboards and do things like that when they really want something. So, the rest of these animals are pretty savvy too. The nice thing about it too is you kind of white knuckle it through some of this movie, because there's bigger floods and there's bigger problems that come up, but I love the fact that you have this confidence in these animals that they're going to somehow address what's happening to them. It's not like, oh, well, now we're going to lose two of the people because it's a terrible wave and they're going to get drowned. I mean, even when the cat falls in the water a number of times, but he's so plucky, and he's just like, knowing what he's doing, and he knows he's watching, he knows how to come back. And, you just sort of see his, okay, one paw in front of the other. I have to do this, and then I have to do this, and then I can get on this, and then I can jump back on the boat or whatever. And he's also generous. He goes and gets the fish for the rest of them to eat too. And that's pretty funny when he's, the cat can swim really well, and he's going underwater looking for the more colorful ones to easily grab that get his attention. But they're very plucky, and they're very adaptable.
Well, once he figures it out too, it's not like the cat immediately figures out how to fish. He observes someone else, and he's like, "Oh, okay, cool," But when they meet that ringtail lemur, it was just great, because the lemur wants to pack up like all these shiny things and drag this bag full of stuff on the boat, and the capybara just keeps knocking the bag out, going, "No, just you."
It's like none of that's really going to help us, I don't think. I mean, it might be fun to play with or distracting because it's pretty, but it's not really what we're after. It's funny too, because the only real threat, I think, to the cat, and to some respects, where there's a little bit of a animosity from a certain member of the world of animals, is the secretary bird, when that flock kind of go after him, and the one who defends him is kind of sort of then shunned by the head of the birds. And, there's this awful kind of moment where he's just kind of holding his head down, like, I have superiority over you, and I'm holding your head into the dirt. But he doesn't kill him. and
No,
he doesn't hurt him and smash him or
well,
anything. He just, I mean, a little bit with the wing, but
he
that's
fractures
when
his
they're,
wing a bit,
yeah,
but
but
yeah,
that's when they're kind of fluttering and arguing almost
yeah.
about it. But I kept thinking, shit, he's going to get killed,
Me too.
but he doesn't. And then, he becomes sort of this friend of theirs too, as
Mhm.
this unbelievable whale that kind of helps them understanding what's sort of, I mean, there's this really, I think, almost this mutual admiration society, like, hey, you made it too, you're surviving too as well. Well, hey, if you figured out there's this boat come along that might be your salvation, hop on board. Like, I'm not going to say you can't ride on us. It's a Noah's Ark quality to it, almost like, hey, we'll take whatever we can get, because maybe there's a chance that this keeps our species or whatever going.
Well, that's what impressed me with this story is you're expecting the real bad to happen, and
Right.
with the bird gets it gets a little existential. You realize what's happened to the bird, probably because of its injury,
Yeah.
at some point. But they even handle that in a positive manner with what
Yes.
happens to the bird, and that's the difference between this apocalyptic film, because it is it's an apocalyptic event, the flood, um versus, say, with All Humans, in that usually with All Humans, let's face it, you get that small group of people being helpful to each other, but most apocalyptic movies show that people are just assholes to people.
Yes.
I mean,
So they made a whole series of that called The Walking Dead. It ran
Walking
for how
Dead,
many
yeah,
goddamn
exactly.
years, well beyond its shelf life. But it's like, are the zombies the worst thing that happened during the apocalypse? No, it's actually the people responding to the zombies.
Yeah, and you just keep running into worse and worse people as the
Exactly.
apocalypse goes on. Whereas here, you don't. I mean, the closest thing you get to kind of assholish creatures, outside of the one leader secretary bird for getting ticked off at the other bird for helping the cat, are the dog buddies. But they're not really like enemies or bad guys. They're just like, bulls in a china shop sort of thing.
Yeah, they're almost like just doing it for sport. Like they're just running around to chase him because, hey, it's something to chase, and he's, different than us, maybe perceived as sort of
Yeah.
a foil, maybe an enemy. But yeah, I mean, it's like they almost realize that the bigger stakes are, hey, we just have to survive, and we have to try to find a way to not drown. And this water keeps rising, and when they come to those ruins and they think, well, maybe we could get on here, and then suddenly the water's rising up on the ruins, and the lemur has to jump on and join them and stuff. It's like, well, join us because you don't have a home either. But you're right. I love that about that fact that there was more humanity, if you will, in the way these animals reacted to each other than you find in movies about the apocalypse with human characters who almost invariably turn into basically utter shits towards each other, and far worse than whatever the existential threat is.
Well, and another thing that might surprise folks is, like, we have the bird who we meet once, fly off, okay,
Right.
and then we get the bird again helping the cat. You think the bird, okay, that's just a character that's going to go fly away. You don't exactly expect the bird to become part of the group.
Right.
Then the ringtail lemur, they actually run into a boat full of lemurs.
Right.
And they hop aboard. And just as this, our buddy lemur is going to make an offering to, like, hey, I want to take off with you, the cat's like, what the hell? Get off our boat. And so they get off the boat and they leave the lemur. So just when you think these characters are going to leave and be with their own, they end up sticking with one another throughout.
Yeah, there's a cooperation and we can all get along kind of idea here too, even to the point where the secretary bird has a hurt wing, but he's not done. So often in things like most movies, like, well, he would be the sacrifice, or he would die, or be shamed and not be able to do something, couldn't survive because of his frailty. Not here. It's done differently, and there's a more nuanced way these animals deal with each other. And to your point, maybe you'd think that he'd go off with the lemurs, being a lemur himself, but no, he's kind of established this new family or this new group of cohorts, and it's working okay. And maybe that's a better, more singular sort of take on it that would behoove him to stay with his new friends rather than just his own kind. I agree with you. I mean, that, and those are some of the things that we're so surprised now this too. There's other little surprises too here where, they do, you can't necessarily follow it per se. Like, well, of course, we're getting to that hour point now, or that 90-minute point now. So now this big thing is going to happen. The dark is before the dawn kind of stuff. It feels much more sort of random and happenstance, which I love. I mean, even the title, it's kind of like they're going with the flow with each other and going with the flow with wherever this is taking them and trying to adapt as they go along without being able to necessarily say, well, now there's this terrible event that's happening and this is the climax and stuff like that. But I love the fact too that there's this weird part where honestly, it's almost like the whale is going to heaven for a minute or something, where they're sort of dealing with this other worldly kind of thing at night and the skies and the lights and stuff like that. And, what does that mean? Is that a near-death experience? Is that some sort of fever dream? Who knows? I mean, there's a little bit of, we're sort of on this planet and there's something bigger maybe at works here that maybe is part of what they're doing, or maybe they can't comprehend that entirely. But
see, I wondered if that's where they kind of went with it, because with the bird, the cat follows the bird up to the tower. He actually leaves. He ends up following the bird instead of the boat. The boat actually gets away from him.
Right.
And he follows him all the way up this very long tower during a storm.
Right.
And then you get this light. And I was trying to weigh going, because this world that they create is fascinating.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, are we going for an existential thing, or has civilization moved off of this planet and is, hovering or whatever above the planet? And did this bird get taken up into a spaceship to be studied rather than...
Yes, right. I meant the bird. I think I said the whale. I meant the bird.
You said, yeah.
I'm sorry. I meant the bird. Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Was it being taken for collection of specimen or whatever rather than an existential thing? But it's all, the movie's all told through the cat's eyes, so you're getting its interpretation of things. And I dug that, because then I started thinking, I'm like, wow, the civilization they have, maybe they've advanced so much that they left the worldly things behind, or they had to abandon quickly, because in the very beginning, and I didn't catch it till the second time, there's a boat stuck in a tree when we first see the cat.
That's right.
And like you said, everything is overgrown and jungle-like and everything, which made me wonder, is this kind of the natural cycle of this planet, to where every so often it floods like a Dickens, and then eventually it drops back down? And I just wondered if maybe that's just the natural cycle, and the people or inhabitants that live on here, they abandoned the planet because they knew, oh, it's about flood time, Well,
I love the fact that those are rather open-ended questions in this film. I think, the filmmaker doesn't spoon feed us everything. It's clear what we're seeing and what they are doing in any given set of circumstances, whether it's jagged rocks or a storm coming up or different things like that. But when they do this kind of thing, it takes on that. Is this a nod to spirituality or to resurrection or to heaven even? Is this a nod to, no matter what happens, there is sort of a sense of God to this, or a plan to this, or the universe is sort of aligning to somehow have these things happen? Or to, I love your take on it, is like, is this sort of the cycle, the circle of life, or the cycle of life, that maybe this happens, and maybe this has happened before we became here? God knows how many centuries a planet could be in existence, lifetimes and whole, galaxies before us. Especially when this one doesn't seem to be exactly one thing that we can nail down as a time and place. And I love that about this, because I think what it's essentially, in some respects, telling us, if there's any message here, are a couple of things. One is, you have to kind of pay attention to what's going on around you, because maybe that's the only thing that you can really affect. Two, you're not in this alone, and you can find people who will help you, and it might come from the strangest places, but there is connection to be had if you look for it and seek it out and kind of go with the flow with it. And the other thing is, some of it is just out of our control, whether it's a flood, whether it's death, whether it's this species having to fight over this thing, or this happenstance or whatever. I think it's interesting. I read that in the original screenplay that Gene Zobolotis did, is the big statue that the cat was going up on was of a person, was of a man.
Oh.
And between the animatic stage and finished animation drawings, they decided to turn it into a cat, which, sort of nods to a well-knowing, smart human who knew that cats are pretty special. You've had all these quotes throughout history, like from Dickens and Socrates and people like that, who speak very highly of the felines, and even the Egyptians used to worship them. Right? There's that old saying that you feed a dog and he goes, "Wow, you feed me, you must be a god," and the cat is fed and he goes, "Wow, you feed me, I must be a god."
God.
But I love the fact that Zobolotis decided to change it to a cat, suggesting that, again, it isn't necessarily a human world as much as maybe it was them living in some sort of mutual respect and glorification as well. I don't know, but it adds a more intriguing part to it, a layer to it, not the least of it that just on face value, this man loved cats, and yet even though he's created this big sort of statue or honor of a cat, he does enough to protect the actual real cat when the floods come. And that high ground and this sort of worshipfulness of this big cat statue or surveying the land isn't enough to help save him. You're gonna have to find some other means. And I just love the fact that the cat is kind of plucky. He's plucky throughout. When he's running from the dogs, he drops his food and the dogs then want that. So that gets him off his back. And, he just kind of goes with the flow. Okay. I didn't want to give up my food, but I don't want these dogs to catch me. So I'll do that and I'll move on and I can find other stuff. And, you see him fishing after that or doing different things. I love the fact that nothing really bothers these creatures, that it takes their mind off of, hey, our basic tenet here is to survive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, they put their differences aside. They crop up occasionally, but they don't last long. They're constantly working together, here and there when they really need to, they pull it together.
Right.
And yeah, this is a delightful film. There was a video game that came out just before or during, just early in the pandemic. It was called Stray, where you actually play as a cat.
Oh, wow.
And you are a cat. Now, they added, being a video game, it added more, a bit more fanciful type thing. You've got alien creatures, you've got androids. It's set in a more technological future.
Sure.
There's creatures and stuff that attack you, and that there's not really a combat system so much as you're running away from things. But there's some. But this reminded me of that because you are a cat. You can meow, you can hop on things, and this felt like a companion piece to that because you don't get a full explanation of that universe either that you're in. It's one of those where you're plopped in, you're introduced to all these elements and things, and it lets you put the things together. And that's what Flow does. I mean, this is one of those movies where there's very few wrong answers to any of the questions that you might have, because
that's a great point.
It very well could be that they give you enough to where what you come up with in your mind is feasible.
That's right. Mark, I'm going to share a quick story with you, and then I want to talk to you a little bit about sort of the whole cat angle. But since we're getting a little esoteric here, years and years ago, maybe turn of the century, I guess it was, I was at a New Year's Eve party, and there was a guest there who had just come off of a plane, and she was sitting next to a doctor, a psychiatrist, who was traveling the world over studying near-death cases in all different kinds of countries, all different kinds of walks of life. And she was fascinated by that, and they were talking about death the whole time, which is so funny because then at the New Year's Eve party, it's Old Lang Syne. You're basically saying goodbye to the dying New Year, and now you're welcoming the new baby New Year, whatever. Anyway, she said that the doctor said that there were, surprisingly, two things were quite common in that no matter where he went or who he talked to, there were similar experiences. One was this sort of tunnel of light that they were gravitating towards, suggesting, going over to heaven or whatever the other side is. But the other one was a question that they were asked as they get to the end of that light, and right before they're going to sort of move across it. And the question was, how have you loved? And when I heard that, it was really profound. I've told this story many times to people because I want to believe it's true. And I don't think he was just bullshitting her.
Mhm.
But what I loved about it is sort of what you're talking about. It's open to our interpretation. There's many interpretations. If that is truly a deity or God or Buddha, or whoever we want to say is somehow asking us, the universe asking us, are you ready to come over? Because I just want to know how your life was. What, how have you loved?
Right.
What was your existence like? Maybe the people who don't cross over haven't loved enough. And yet it's up to us to determine how we've loved. What have we loved? It's not who have you loved or when have you loved or how fully have you loved? It's how have you loved? Did you complain about it being cold even though it was a sunny day? Or do you complain about, this when there's things to count your blessings? Did you go to work every day and enjoy the vocation you chose to do? Or were you one of those majority of Americans who will complain about their jobs and say, oh, I hate my job? That doesn't make any sense for 40 years. So why didn't you change it? Why didn't you find something you love more? Do you love your body, or have you abused it, with drugs or whatever else, things like that? I mean, I think there's all kinds of, do we enjoy time on a podcast with a good man and a good friend like you? Yes, absolutely. We're not getting paid for this. We do it because we love Mark. So I think and I think there's a little bit of that here too, is like, what are you doing to help get to the end of the day with your life and your sort of system intact? There's an ecosystem, it got broken. There's a style that the cat was enjoying, a life that got broken. How well do you adapt? Do you love yourself? Do you love your fellow beast? Do you love staying alive? Do you love the opportunities that are presenting itself here to keep going? And I think this film is really very, not only just beautiful art and a clever story, but I think it's that sort of spiritual.
It's a Zen movie. It's
very Zen.
It's a very Zen movie because even at the most, say, exciting or tense moments, they're really not that tense. You feel for your characters.
Right.
You do. Don't get me wrong. You get emotional. Right. You do feel nervous that maybe they just might not make it.
Right.
But it's not so intense and done so dramatically to where you're like, oh yeah, it's inevitable. Nothing's really inevitable in this film as much as you might expect it to be. And then by the end of it, you're like, oh, this did not end the way I thought it was going to end.
Right. And they have a little bit of that Hollywood ending where, like, you've got one last crisis where the vote's going to crash and can you get the guy? But they do that really well too, where it's not overly done. And, it's still kind of about, hey, we're kind of, the family that we've chosen now to sort of help each other out here. And we're kind of all in this together. The one thing I wanted to say too, that I don't know how you feel about it, but I used to be a big, I had 2 cats and they were my ex-wives in my life. I mean, we love these cats so much. They were our children and they provided so much pleasure and hilarity and everything else. And I've always had a special place for cats because of that, as well as, I think cats are very special creatures. And I'm encouraged that cats this year had kind of a comeback, or at least, as heroic cats in A Quiet Place Day One. That cat is very smart and very giving in it. He's not, oftentimes cats are portrayed as, oh, they're selfish or they don't care or they abandon you or whatever like that. I mean, even in A Quiet Place Day One, the cat runs away when he knows he's in danger, but he comes back to check on his friend, knowing that, hey, now that we're both safe and I let you hide without having to worry about me, I liked hanging around you. Let's hang out together. Who wouldn't want to hang out with Lupita? Come on. But here too, the cat is okay. Yeah, there's the foil of the cats and dogs kind of cliche, but you like the cat, and it's never laughing at the cat or making fun of the cat or condescending to the cat or making him into like, oh, here's the part where the cat, wink, wink, always has to be selfish in the Hollywood version of Cats.
Yeah.
Or, you know, I also would resent in movies for years, and I'm sure you've experienced this. It's my number one pet peeve. We very seldom talk about it in the horror genre, but I always dislike it in the horror genre when they kill off the family pet or an innocent animal early in the film to show, oh, the killer is killing. He's starting with, you know, the family pet.
Yeah.
And sometimes it makes sense, sometimes not. I mean, I almost was wondering, like, do I sit through The Conjuring knowing that poor dog died in the first 10, 15 minutes? It's like, all right, I'm going to give this one a chance because it's a real story. And I'm not happy they did that. But, and oftentimes it's the cat that gets it. I mean, I walked out of the remake of Willard because Laura Haring from Mulholland Drive brings over that cat. And the cat is then put into the room with all the rats. And, you know, it's just played for a joke, like, oh, the cat's life means nothing. Here, I love the fact that we are loving this cat, and he's plucky and he's smart, and he's, you know, he's just kind of in awe of the world around him, but we're also kind of in awe of him because he's a fighter and he's a survivor.
He's just downright adorable too.
Yeah, he is. Those big yellow eyes. And by the way, some people were trying to say that he's a black cat. It's like, no, Geens said, no, he's a dark gray cat. And you know, the way he's illuminated, you can see that. But I mean, he didn't want to go with the cliche of like the black cat, you know, and all the lore that we put into that shit.
See, I wasn't never really a cat person until we got a cat. We got a cat. Was not my choice to get a cat. And I liked our cat because it was our pet, not because he was a cat. I didn't hold him being a cat against him. You know, but by the end of it, I warmed up to cats and got a more appreciation. You know, unfortunately, we lost him a number of years ago, but and by then I kind of grew an appreciation for cats and that, and looked at them slightly differently. But I like pets in general. So me
too. I'm a big animal lover, and you know, stuff like that. But cats are my favorite.
So this film, you know, was right up my alley, and just, I mean, it's smart. And you know what? I think that's why the Academy may just have a bit of their hands full, a harder time picking best animated feature than they will having picked best feature, because the reason why, hell, 4 of my top 10 films from 2024 were kids movies. It was Inside Out 2. It was Sonic 3. It was you know, Flow, and it was The Wild Robot. Because I'm looking at these going, somebody woke up and they're making smart animated films again. They're not making necessarily. Now, I'm not saying all of them. I'm not trying to be hyperbole here, but I'm just saying it seems to be more and more more of these wider release animated films actually have some smarts to them, like we used to get in the 80s with kids movies. You know?
I agree. And I also think that it's a slow sort of build, but it is a build where I think with the sort of renewal of Disney with the musicals in the 80s, with Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, as well as Pixar and all the things that they did. And then, you know, stop motion and things like Coraline and, you know, the Box Trolls and some of those kind of things. And even to some degree, Despicable Me, which had a very sort of, you know, French sort of quality of comedy to it. It almost felt like it was Mr. Hulot or something, you know, in a way. They're broadening what animation can be. And I dare say it's nice with a movie like Flow too, where they're broadening what a film could look like. This represents the animals pretty realistically.
Yeah.
You know, it's not doing the Pixar version of the animals, which is a great look, but everybody does that now. And you know, it just has become such a look that they have memes on AI that they can turn you into a Pixar character. And everybody kind of looks the same. It's all like, you know, it's all the big eyes and like, hey, I'm innocent. But I hope this keeps swinging that door open on animation, because I think I would love to see horror done as animation. There was a series of shorts that were done, I think for maybe a half hour shorts or whatever it was a few years back of Edgar Allan Poe, and they had 4 different
Mm.
animation houses do them, and they did them really well. And I think you can create scary animation. I think you can create very adult animation. Remember that Paperman, I think it was, with the guy with the airplane, the
Yeah.
short, the one for where it's black and white, and it was a little bit more like a 60s look to it.
Oh
There's
yeah.
so many different ways to do this and appeal to a broader audience, just the kiddie audience. Now, I think a movie like Flow and maybe Inside Robot and some of these others have an appeal to 4 quadrants, all age groups, all audiences. But animation can be for something for adults. I mean, I've always thought one of the things they should have done, and they're probably not going to do it now, but the Beatles had 9 years together as the greatest rock band, and I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if you did a mini series of that and gave an animation house 2 hours to do an animated movie of each of those years?
Mm.
So you get 18 hours, and it's different animation houses. Like, the way that somebody's going to do the 1964 and the period of Hard Day's Night and Richard Lester is going to look different than the Maharishi Yellow Submarine time, which would probably make it look more like Peter Max. but I think, to your point, animation is coming a long way, continues to come a long way. Memoirs of a Snail and some of the other things that have come out in the last few years definitely have an edge to them. They don't look like the typical cartoon stuff, and I think the genre is all the better for it.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's almost like what we got in the, I want to say, late 80s, late 70s, early 80s with the Bakshi stuff.
Yeah, that's right. He was trying to do very adult animation. American Pie. Well, of course, Fritz the Cat, back in the mid 70s, and X-rated cartoons, which were like, holy shit.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you had heavy metal, you had Wizards,
right.
some of
the R. Crumb shorts that were done with his sort of animation style too, et cetera, et cetera.
We've covered a number of the films on here. I mean, we used to do animation months, but I think we went through most of the adult animated film months, but we did do some of those. And, Fire and Ice was another one that came out. Animation can be for adults. It can be appreciated by adults. I'm trying to remember, there was one very recently I reviewed, well, not too recently, it was like 2018, I think. It was an animated film that was very similar to Heavy Metal. It was fantasy, it was more mature material, but it was just wild. And I'm just like, do some more of that, especially especially with the Gen X and the Gen Z and the Zennial, us from the 80s and 90s and that, who had
grew up with Liquid Television and MTV's various animated things that they did. What was the one with the woman who kept getting killed? She was like a spy and like
Aeon Flux.
Aeon Flux, yes. She would always stop to like do this incredible French kissing with some spy that she was supposed to be killing, and they'd have a close up of their tongues going like,
yeah, it was comic. It was done in such a comical way.
And then she got killed at the end of every one of those 3-minute shorts, but that was very well done. And so there's been plenty of, I mean, my God, all the Liquid Television, the stop motion stuff. I mean, I still point to Coraline as one of the high watermarks of animation. That movie was terrifying. And I mean, I don't know how kids sat through it, because I'm sitting there as an adult going like, shit, this button spider lady and that stuff is terrifying. I even was kind of scared when they were doing the acrobatics in the old Sisters vaudeville show, and they're diving off of, it looks like 500 feet off the ground and stuff. Those perspectives were incredible. So animation really can do so many things in world build, and this world builds too, and it's realistic, but it's also fantastical, and it's just so effective. And I think a lot of it too, but like this to me is one of the reasons I think it's become such an international success, is because it doesn't rely on an American point of view with a sense of humor or the dialogue. It's a human story told through these animals trying to survive, and it doesn't need a word of dialogue at all. The storytelling is so visual and powerful that we hear what they're saying without them having to speak our language to make it relatable.
Exactly. Just through their emotions and facial expressions, you know exactly what they're saying to each other, even though you can't understand it, and that's the thing is, I think it feels slowly like we're getting back to those type of animated films that aren't holding back, they're not going extreme, but they're
Right.
not holding back from a little bit more uh uh mature or elevated
Right.
discussions.
Right.
I mean, Inside Out 2, we had it. The Wild Robot had death, had
For
animals eating
sure.
other animals. Now, you didn't see the eating, but any kid who's smart enough will put
Yep.
two and two together of what happened. They put it in there. This is the natural world. This is what you have. And it was still a wonderful story. They didn't have to Disneyize it, as it's been termed, sometimes.
Right.
And Disney, look at the stuff Disney used to do constantly. Bambi, parents dead, boom, dead.
Yeah,
Dumbo,
some
look at
real
Dumbo.
edge to stuff
You know?
there. Yeah. And then even, some of the Pixar stuff where characters have, been killed, or even, at the end of Toy Story 3 where they're going to go into the incinerator. I mean, holy crap. I mean, you can push this stuff and kids don't resent it. They may have wet the seats of Radio City Music Hall in 39 when Snow White came out, but they loved it. Kids like to be scared, and they can be
Yeah.
shown all kinds of different stuff here. It's interesting too, like even thinking about like a filmmaker like Quentin Tarantino, the backstory of the Lucy Liu character in the first Kill Bill was done as an 8-minute animated sequence, and it was very violent and had great sound effects and great animation and stuff. And, it was done as a sort of a nod to that genre of, chop sake and manga or whatever you want to call it. But that was very well done too. And I kept thinking, who's to say that couldn't make just a great movie for that doesn't have to necessarily be just in a genre or just, for, one kind of set world of bloody adventure like that was. But I mean, it just like, I think adults are now, and we've all grown up loving cartoons. Heck, we watch Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer every Christmas, and that's 60 years old by now.
It is. Well, a movie like the ones we've mentioned, and especially a movie like Flow, I think are ones that'll be appreciated for years to come.
For sure.
I think this is going to be one where it's probably going to show up in at least one film class at some point.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, it's one of those I think will be, written about, and like, what does it mean? And what does this mean? And interpretations of it, as well as just, you think about, there's a silent movie quality to this, almost like, the kind of stuff we would appreciate from Chaplin or Keaton or Harold Lloyd and people like that, who just did these incredible stories that were so visual that, you're watching them, and sometimes the title card will come up and you're just like, I almost didn't need the title card. They don't really need the dialogue that I'm reading, because they're just so visual. And this is one of those things where no dialogue need. I know what that cat is thinking. I know what he's going to do. I know his fear. It's really an accomplished performance. Think about it. I mean, we never nominate performances like this. And our awards, we gave a Sight Unseen award to Lupita for her voiceover performance. And that's a lovely award. And there's been pressure on the Academy to do that for years. But I love the fact that this is such a great character performance from all of them, but particularly that cat. And yet it's not an actor playing it. It's really,
it's animators.
It's animators making it. And yet, that performance is so vivid. It's as vivid as most performances on screen with human actors this year.
Yeah. Flow is just an amazing film. I think we'll wrap it up here. But folks, if you get a chance to see it, it's out on streaming now. Actually, it's funny. I just recommended it to a friend today on Facebook. They were talking about what I had seen, and I said they had 2 younger kids, and 8 and 10, I think they said. And they were like, and I'm like, Flow. I'm like, check out Flow. I'm like, you'll be, and like, I thought maybe it'd be later on, but literally like 2 hours later, they texted me back going, that movie was amazing.
It really is.
They loved it. They're a filmmaker as well. And and they loved the film. They're like, wow. They're like, and yeah, this is a film that I think will appeal to a lot of people. You can enjoy it. It's not long. It's got a perfect little runtime. It gets in, gets out, gives you everything and more than what you might expect from a film like this. And so check out Flow, folks. And now, as I do always when I have guests on my show, they have a license to shill. So not only should you check out Flow, but Jeff, what should they check out of yours where they can follow your stuff?
Well, I have a movie site called theestablishingshot.org. I do reviews of both movies and certain television shows and or miniseries generally, but mostly film. And I do caricatures of the films and shows that strike me in a particularly good way. I can also be found as Jeff York Chicago and Jeff York Caricatures, two different sites on Instagram. I do illustration on the side as well as some other writing on the site. I am pipelineartists.com. I'm in there a couple times a month writing an essay about the film industry with illustration I've drawn as well. So those are the main places I'm at. A member of the Chicago Indie Critics. We just had our awards. I don't agree with all of them, but
Smoking like a true critic.
I know, isn't that funny? Gee, I'm surprised he said that. But I'm also a member of SAG, and I just voted on that this week.
Oh,
so we'll see if my choices are more in line with the rest of the voting body there. But so those are the things I've done. I will give a quick shill to my friend Ron Fassler, who I illustrated a book for. It's his second book that he's written. It's about replacement casts and the hirings and firings of Broadway shows. It's fascinating to read. I would recommend it even without my 14 illustrations, but the fact that I have 14 illustrations in it is all the more reason to buy it. And you can go and buy that book at ronfassler.org. That's RONFASSLER.org, where you can find the book. It's entitled The Show Goes On, and it's my 8th book that I've illustrated, I'm proud to say. And so that's quite a bit of shill. I don't know if you're expecting that much. I hope we didn't go over the hour mark.
Oh, don't worry. Don't worry about that at all. And yeah, the nominations come out within the next week. They were delayed due to the fires. Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that. So thank you, Jeff. Thank you everyone for tuning in. And yeah, go watch Flow. And have a good evening and keep your ticket stub.